hiring a team. So all of this sounds great. And obviously a lot of founders go through this process with you, and founders and marketers will read the book. And the next question will be, how do I actually create the structure around me to make this work? And sometimes the stuff is actually sort of easier when you are your little one-man band doing your experiments and doing your things. However, needing to delegate, needing to create the system, needing these things to scale as they do, like how does that actual team setup look? And is that different for different consumer or business or B2B?
So remember in the beginning, I said I saw a few patterns of failure. I saw a lot of founders making the same avoidable mistakes over and over again. And I think messing up hiring is probably the top of that list. So the first thing you need to figure out, a head of growth is not a head of marketing. If you read, the stories I've just told you or any of these case studies, you're going to see that successful growth levers often cut across engineering, product, there is some marketing, sales, customer service, compliance, onboarding, user experience design, it's all over the place. So your head of growth is going to be a person who's got their fingers in all of these pies. The second thing is your head of growth has to be incredibly brilliant because it's very hard to figure these things out. Third, they have to be an expert in all of your data in this growth model. Fourth, they have to be an expert in your customers. And fifth, if they're going to be any good and they're going to want to stick around, they're going to need to have a lot of upside incentive. So if I just describe the smartest person in your business who can control all the resources, understands the customers, understands the data, and has the most upside.
Sounds like it's the founder.
Sounds an awful lot like a founder.
Except for the being brilliant.
I think, that British humility. I think founders do tend to be extraordinarily bright people. And the thing, I guess, this is a bit of a tangent, but that contrasts sort of a founder brilliant with sort of brilliant in other careers, is founder brilliant are really good at figuring things out, as opposed to like getting A's on tests. And I think it's a different, very useful kind of brilliant. Anyways, so I do think for any startup, your first head of growth is your founder, is figuring these things out. Now, when it comes time to hire, the main thing is you have to be honest with yourself. Have you found a lever yet or not? Or are you hiring a playbook writer or a playbook runner? Now, if you're hiring from big established companies, marketers, growth people in big companies get promoted for doing all the things and doing them well and not making mistakes and managing bigger budgets and project management. First and foremost, they're executors. They're not going to say, hey, let's not do 90% of this stuff. They're going to say, hey, you told me to do it, let's do it. If you need to hire a playbook writer, you're hiring someone who's going to come in and figure out how to grow your business, it's a very different profile. And so the first thing is just being honest and acknowledging that. If you're hiring a playbook runner, you've got a channel, you've got a lever, you've got something that's working really well. And your rate limiting step is we can't do this fast enough. We need more people. If you're still trying to figure it out, playbook writers, we can talk about how to hire them, but the main thing I'm looking for, they often don't come from growth or marketing backgrounds at all. They tend to be bright generalists and problem solvers and people who can figure things out.
So if I'm sitting in an interview right now and you're my hiring manager and I'm going for a head of growth role at System, what are the questions you're asking me to flush out whether I'm capable of doing this job or not?
So I'm trying to figure out not what you've done, but what you can figure out. Do you think you have all the answers? So I'm going to ask you things. How does this job fit into your learning plan? What are you hoping to learn in this job? Has this person even thought about their next job as something other than a paycheck? Is learning even important to them? Tell me about a mistake you made and what you learned from it. Are they comfortable talking about their mistakes? Have they reflected on them and actually taken lessons from them? What do you see as the big open questions that you'll need to figure out coming into this role? Do they think they have all the answers or not? Have they given thought to some of the things they need to figure out? Even just like, do you have any questions for me? Like literally, are they curious? So for me, it's much more about like, do they acknowledge the stuff they don't know? And do they have a good sense that there's going to be a lot of learning and experimentation here?
And are there like specific questions that you think are just brilliant for flushing out those kind of things? Because I suppose, my concern when you is okay, interestingly, I've hired a lot of people. And when you said some of these questions back to me, I was like, God, I actually know the answer to that. And yet on the spot, I might freeze. Mm-hmm. For example, what's like a big mistake you've made or whatever? I mean, I've asked that question to thousands of people, right? Mm-hmm. However, on the spot, I can see it's quite difficult. You'd be like, oh God, I'm in a high-pressured interview situation and I want this head of growth role. and I want to do growth at this startup. As a hiring manager, what is your approach on what are the cues and things you're looking for behaviorally from the person? Like, for example, is it a red flag if they just come back with a perfect answer, or do you actually want them to sit and think?
That's exactly the right question to ask me right now. You're exactly right. Because how they answer it, how they react to being put in that situation tells you everything you need to know. You may not have a failure teed up because you didn't know that was going to be an interview question. But does the thought of talking about failure in an interview frighten you? Do you get defensive? Everyone's got a story teed up about, like, tell me about your weakness. Do you give me the bullshit answer, scripted answer to a different question? Or do you stop and think through it and come up with and remember a mistake you've made? And then you also know what you've learned from it because you already thought about that when the mistake happened. So much of what you're looking for is not the answer, but how they think about it, how they react to it. And you can learn a lot by someone by, like, what do they consider a mistake? Some people say, my mistake was I let this campaign go out with all these typos in it. That person isn't what you need in a startup. Typos are not the difference between your startup succeeding and failing, right? So yeah, so much of it, you're right, is down to how they answer it.